So here's a question for you. How many of you have ever cut your finger? Looks like we're just about 100%, except for the perfectionists in the room. So everyone has had the experience of cutting their finger. And I invite you in this moment to think about one of those times, maybe from a while back or from when you were a child, and look at your fingers. Is the cut still there? Of course not. It healed ages ago. There might be a scar and a story, but the actual cut is long gone. Now ask yourself this: how did you make that happen? What steps did you take? Your answer is likely that you did not really do that much to accomplish the actual healing, other than keep the wound covered and clean so that it could remain free of infection. The cut healed from the inside out and then vanished after time as a result of your good self-care, that good wound care that you applied. The body heals itself. And I'd like to suggest that just as with the body, our hearts, our minds, and our lives may be similarly healed from the inside out, so that in time, as long as we keep our hearts and our lives clean, covered, and free of infection, what we will discover as time goes on from those wounds that appear on our heart is that they vanish, except for a scar and maybe a story that we can tell. This process of healing our heart is also unconscious. Just as the way the body closes a wound, our spirit heals itself without conscious effort from us as to accomplish the specifics of that healing. Healing takes its own path on its own timeline. And our job is to remain clean and clear and free of infection. This process of healing starts with our relationship to ourselves. And that's some good news, because often, or sometimes at least, we find ourselves in times and in phases or seasons of our lives where it feels like perhaps we've broken parts of our external lives. We may have lost a job or lost a loved one or had a relationship that we cared about come to an end. And it may feel like that brokenness is permanent. But healing begins with the self. As Alice Walker once wrote, healing begins where the wound was made. Where the wound was made. And anything that is happening in your external lives can be healed by showing up and being present in and among yourself. The relationship with yourself is where that healing begins. However, sometimes it can be difficult to follow that path of healing because in our culture, we're often taught that to care for ourselves is to be somewhat selfish. Now I know, because I walk with Nika every week, that she tells you to take good care of yourselves on a regular basis, and that she models that for you. So I hope that my words come as a moment of encouragement to keep doing that work that she so expertly guides and nurtures you to do. One of my favorite authors, Parker Palmer, writes about self-care that self-care is never a selfish act. It is simply good stewardship of the only gift we were given, the gift we were put on earth to offer to others. Our lives, our kindness, our loving, that is that gift. He goes on, anytime we can listen to true self and give the care it requires, we do it not only for ourselves, but for those whose lives we touch. We are called to be in relationship to ourselves, to keep ourselves clean and covered and free of infection in the midst of whatever it is that is tearing us up and to know that healing is occurring, even when it doesn't feel like it, even when we resist it. And it starts with the body. It starts with this gift we were given to experience and be in the world. Now, we have our own body, we live inside of this body, but we do not live alone. We live in relationship with one another. And when we go through times that are difficult, I like to think of ourselves that one of the best ways we can practice that self-care that's outside of our body is to Velcro ourselves to the people we care about, to just get really close and just adhere to them so that they cannot let us go. Because we do not transform and heal on our own. We transform through the loving care that we give and receive with one another. It does not matter who you have been, what you imagine you have done, or what may yet happen to you. That healing can take place when you show up and let another see your woundedness. So first, we're called to be in relationship and to see that wound in ourselves. Second, we're called to share that wound with another. And that's hard work because it requires that we be vulnerable. It requires that we be emotionally naked with one another. Emotionally naked is difficult work. But it is also where some of the best magic happens. I don't know about you, but I think that physical nakedness also leads to good things like babies. And since we all probably like babies, I'd like to invite you to consider that just as physical nakedness can lead to wonderful outcomes like babies, emotional nakedness can lead to wonderful outcomes of healing and wholeness and joy and kindness that we can share and be with one another. Emotional babies doesn't really work as a metaphor, but you get the point. You get the point. So I want to share a story about how this worked in my life from a while ago, about how when I was struggling to find wholeness in my life, I Velcroed myself to those around me and was healed. So a couple of years ago, when I was in the midst of graduate school and raising children and working at the hospital, I decided that life was maybe a little bit boring, so I would get a divorce on top of that. No, I'm just kidding. It was a very difficult time. In the midst of all this season of time and of change, I found myself at the end of a long-term marriage. And while it was amicable and continues to be amicable, it was very difficult. And I adhered myself to my friends and my family. And one morning when I woke up, as is my custom, before dawn, I went to my living room and saw that there had been a package delivered outside my front door the night before. And since it wasn't close to my birthday or the holidays, I was immediately curious about who that package was from. As I stooped down to pick up that package, I saw the impossibly neat handwriting of my cousin Christina from back east, who I'd seen some weeks prior at a family wedding. So I took that package and went back to my coffee and sat on my couch and opened up the package and discovered inside 3 things. First, Amy Poehler's very funny book on divorce. Second, a poem by Haydn, our poem called Allegro by Haydn. No, not by Haydn. I can't remember that author right now. I'll look it up for you. A poem called Allegro that includes a reference to Haydn. Third, it's all about imperfection. Third, there was a note from my cousin. And in her note, she wrote very specifically to the struggle that I was going through, some words of encouragement. She wrote that she wanted me to know that she sees my struggle, that she enters it in with me, and that she sees ahead a land of healing and wholeness, and she will walk with me on that path until I arrive. I trust you, she said, to keep going. I burst into tears, as that is the only appropriate response when someone really, truly takes the time to see you and to know and to trust that you are capable of healing whatever wound is in you. Her gift of encouragement allowed me to keep trusting myself and to keep holding on to that thread that would lead me back to a place of wholeness. I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have completed graduate school, completed internship, completed a divorce, loved my children, and come out without all of that care and love and attachment to other people. It took courage, and courage is the backside of vulnerability. As Brené Brown writes, that most people believe that vulnerability is a form of weakness. But really, vulnerability is courage. Vulnerability is courage, the courage to show up and be seen, the courage to ask for what you need, the courage to talk about how you are feeling, and the courage to have those hard conversations. The courage to take that next step. Along the way and all of my travels in my life, I've come to realize that courage is like this elixir, a tiny dropper, a very powerful push in the right direction to wholeness, to goodness. But it's only given out in the tiniest amounts, just enough to get you through the next breath, the next moment, the next conversation, to give you that little push to take the leap, to know that you are already on the path to wholeness. So we are called to be in relationship to ourselves. We are called to be in relationship to one another, because when we invite others into our vulnerability, we give them permission to also be vulnerable. Third, we are called to be in relationship to something greater than ourselves. Some people call that God. Some people call that the all of creation. Some people have no name at all for that. But we are called to be in relationship to the heart of the world, however you define that. We are called to be in intentional communities of care, such that we can see, hear, know, and bless one another on our journeys. I like to think of it as a communion of sorts. When we did our Heart Sutra this morning, we were participating in a communion, not just with our own heart and maybe the heart of those that are immediately in our lives, but also with the heart of the world. And that as we strengthen that connection to our own and others and the world's heart, our hearts expand. Our hearts expand. One of the ways that I have learned in these last 3 or 4 years as I've moved through the ministerial process how to heal and how to hold space is to just become more and more quiet in my heart. I'd like to teach you one of the techniques that I've learned along the way and offer it to you as a way of homework for the week. It's very simple. Next time you feel overwhelmed or diminished inside, I invite you to remember that the inside of your body, that which is underneath your skin, belongs completely to you. Belongs to you. This is your body, this is my body, and you are invited to fill up all of the space within your body. And one of the ways you can get access to that is just to place your finger very gently on your pulse. I like the wrist pulse. Some people like the neck pulse, whichever one feels more comfortable to you. Just to gently, you can do it as you're sitting at your desk or at your kitchen table. Just gently rest your thumb or fingers on that pulse. And just notice. That is your heart. That is your heart beating. That is your life. That is your breath. Feel how spacious you are inside. Feel how spacious you are inside. When we do this work of becoming ever more spacious inside, we realize that there is a part of us that is already whole. Always whole. Wholly whole and blessedly holy. I am whole. You are whole. We are all whole. Already fully and completely so. All the days of our life. I will leave you with a blessing from Hildegard of Bingen. She writes, as she blesses the people in her time and in her space many centuries ago, she wrote, "Good people, most royal greening verdancy rooted in the sun, you shine with radiant light. In this circle of earthly existence, you shine so finely it surpasses understanding. God hugs you. You are encircled by the arms of the mystery of God. God hugs you. Be encircled in the mystery of God. And hug one another today. Hug one another and hug yourselves. Amen.